Copyright University of Auckland, all rights reserved. The content and delivery of lectures in this course are protected by copyright. Material belonging to others may have been used in these lectures and copied by and solely for the educational purposes of the university under licence. You may record the lectures for the purposes of private study or research, but you may not sell, alter, or further reproduce or distribute any part of these lectures to any other person. Failure to comply with the terms of this warning may expose you to legal action for copyright infringement by the copyright owner and/or disciplinary action by the university.
Okay, good afternoon and welcome back. Did anyone leave their heart here? Did you know if you laid all of your veins end to end, you'd die? Now, let's get on with the next part of this. We'll have a look at some more consumer finance. All sorts of face painting too. We had a funny moustache yesterday and a cat face today. Be much funnier if everyone in the class had their face painted and you all looked up at the same time with these weird faces. Right, we've got loads of different sources of finance. I want to relate this to what we're doing and what we're going to go on to do and think about risk and return when you invest in things. These top-level financial providers, the ones that are there on the high street, tend to lend to people who are good credit risks. That is, they feel that the chance of not getting their money back is really low. And they do a lot of assessment to assure themselves that that's going to happen. And the main things that lenders look at are, firstly, are you likely to be able to repay the loan from the income that you receive on a regular committed basis? And the second thing most lenders look at is to say to themselves, if that stops, if you can't repay your loan, have you got something that's worth something that we can take away from you and sell and get our money back? So there are two real aspects of most lending. Now, it takes a lot of time and effort for a lender to assess every individual in that way. They need to ask for a lot of information, they need to check up and do a lot of follow-up. And so a lot of them start to rely on things that we call credit or debt ratings, an assessment from a third party as to whether or not you're safe as a borrower. And typically a lot of that revolves around how safe you've been in the past. Have you managed your finances well? And so as we move down the list of providers of finance, we start to move into those that consider the risk of lending to you is a little bit higher. Firstly, because you may not have a wonderful history of borrowing, or secondly, simply because you don't have any history of borrowing. And so these other lenders start to take more risks because they don't know how good you are as a borrower. And the result of that higher risk is generally that they charge a higher rate of interest. And so as we start to go further into this, we look at the rates of return for an investor, and we think of the lender as being an investor in you. You are the asset that that lender is going to have on their balance sheet. The future flow of interest and principal repayments from you, and the rate of return that they require on that loan is determined by how risky they consider you to be. So we start to move into different types of lenders that provide finance. Life insurance companies. Life insurance companies collect premiums, or premia, from people, and they therefore have a lot of cash. And they tend to invest that cash in things. And one of the easier ways of investing cash is to lend it to people. So we can find that life insurance companies will lend money to individuals. Your friends and family are a good source of loans, if they have any money, and if they consider you to be a trustworthy relative to lend to. And then we start to move down the list into lenders who are willing to lend, provided they can overcome some of the problems. And pawn shops are, now, note the spelling of this. Just be careful what sort of pawn shop you go to get money. The pawn shop will lend money on the basis that you might not have enough income to afford to repay the loan, but that you're willing to give up an asset that has some value as security against that loan. So if for some reason you're unable to repay the loan, that asset can be sold and the lender is able to recoup their money from that sale. Now, we're starting to move down the list of lenders into that territory where we often refer to the lender as a loan shark. And predominantly because of the amount of blood they extract from you in order to get their repayment. The interest rates are getting higher and higher and higher the lower down this list of lenders that you get. And it's really important to consider your ability to service a loan, particularly when you start borrowing money from those who are willing to offer it to you, but consider the risk to be really high. And the advice is simply to avoid borrowing from these lower and lower and lower categories of lenders, because the interest rates they charge tend to go higher and higher and higher, exceptionally high in some places, and your protection as a borrower starts to run out a little bit. Now, as far as managing your credit goes, this is managing your loans, that finance that you have sourced from other people. It's important then to consider where you're getting that money from, and to do a little bit of thinking about how you borrow money from different sources. So we're going to make some comparisons here about different finance contracts. Now, I'm going to steer clear of the traditional ones that you're probably familiar with. Your credit card, for instance, if you have a credit card, discloses a lot of details in its contract about the interest rate you're going to be charged. It's really important you read that. How many people read terms and conditions before you click the accept button? You do? Good. Not many people do. You tend to think, well, I want the product, the service that's being offered online, and terms and conditions are probably going to be governed by some kind of legal agreement that I'm protected by, so I'll just click yes, and all of my data will become available to anyone who wants it. The same with your information that you provide when you borrow money. It's important to realise that that information is collected and collated so that other lenders have access to it. How many people have heard of the company called Credit Simple? No. Credit Simple gathers information about you, about your lending habits, your borrowing habits, your borrowing history, and collates that into some information that's provided to anybody who's in the future going to lend to you, to tell those people what kind of credit risk you are. So it's important to think about doing the same to them. Think very carefully about the lender before you borrow money from them. Look at the different features that are provided in the loan. In particular, there really are only very few things that a lender can change in a loan contract. We're talking about an amount of money that you borrow, how long you pay that money back over the length of the loan, what interest rate is provided for that loan, how the repayments are structured over time. There's really not a lot else. So let's have a look at each of those features. Let's have a look at a way of comparing different loans by thinking about the different components of those loans. And we're going to think about that by trying to summarise them mathematically into simple, easy to understand numbers. Now, in addition to interest rates, there are usually lots of other costs associated with borrowing money. There are typically things that banks and other finance companies call set-up costs or administration charges. And what I'd like to do is think of a way of turning those costs into something that's more able to be understood in comparison to other things. So we're going to try and take all of the costs associated with loans and just arithmetically turn them into an equivalent interest rate per annum over the life of the loan. That way we get to compare different loans with different structures, with different components on a like-for-like basis. So we'll have a look at doing that mathematically, and it's not as hard as it sounds. When you offer collateral, now the word collateral simply refers to the concept that I've already talked about. Anything that you own that's of value, you can offer to a lender and say, if I can't repay the loan, you can have this. Your spouse, your children, whatever it happens to be that might be of value, offer them. You never know, you may be able to get rid of them. Oh, probably not. We are talking about assets rather than liabilities here. No, I'm talking about children, not partners. So collateral reduces the riskiness of a loan from the lender's perspective, in that if something goes wrong, they have an asset that can be sold to recover the money. And you should expect to be compensated for that reduction in riskiness by being charged a lower rate of interest. Another balancing act that we have to consider. And as I said in the end, we really are concerned with just a few. Is this a question coming? Excellent, thank you. Fire away. Loan maturity. Oh, okay, loan maturity. That simply means the last date that the loan is available to be paid back. So it's your final payment date on the loan establishes how long that loan is, not how grown up it is. So, okay. I know you didn't have that confusion. So maturity date simply refers to the final repayment date of the loan when its last payment is due. Now, if you don't pay on time, you quite often get stung with extra charges. The terms and conditions that many of us don't read fully, but some of us do read fully, and I applaud you for that, are really important to have a look through. So although the interest rate on a loan may look reasonable, if for any reason you do something wrong, the lender might have the right to charge a penalty interest rate. Our student loans have penalty interest rates. If you don't make payments when you should make payments, there is an extra interest added to the basic interest that pushes the rate up. And sometimes those penalty rates are really, really punitive. They're very, very high. And then we get offers that are often made to us publicly that appear to be interest-free loans. And I've simply said here, be suspicious of interest-free loans, apart from your student loan, of course, which is interest-free for a certain period of time and up to a point. But there are other deals that are given to us. Now, in order to evaluate this, what I want to do is think about our maths that we've done so far in a slightly different way. And that is to simply think about if we don't know one component of a mathematical equation, we can rearrange that equation in order to make that component of it the dependent variable and all of the others the ones that influence it. So we're going to take our little formula that we had for future value, the one that everybody kind of understands because it involves compound interest, and simply rearrange it to say, well, imagine if we knew what the future value is and we wanted to find out what the present value was. We don't know what the present value is. So our rearrangement of that formula is simply to move it around arithmetically, follow the rules of maths, and we end up with the bottom formula that we have here that says if you do know the future value and you want to find out the present value, this is all you have to do. Divide the future value by 1 plus your interest rate raised to the power of the number of periods that we're looking at. Which sounds a wee bit silly. Why would you ever do that? So let's have a look at some circumstances where you might want to think in this backward way, and then move on to applying this backward thinking to some other situations to demonstrate that it can often help us to analyse financial situations particularly. So an example of thinking backwards might be you want to go on holiday, not straight away, but in a few years' time. And you know exactly what the price of that holiday is going to be. It's advertised. So 2 years is a rather long time, but we quite often see ads for holidays that you need to book maybe 6 months in advance. So I'm extending it out just to give an example of how this might work for a longer period of time. Now, how much money would you need today so that in 2 years' time you had $5,000 to pay for the holiday? Now, obviously, it's not going to be $5,000 because the money you've got today you can put on deposit and you can earn interest. So this is our backward way of working to solve for this sort of problem. If you know what deposit rates are, let's say they're 10%, we can now work out how much money you would need today so that if you put it on deposit, at an interest rate of 10%, which is compounding annually, in 2 years' time you'd have exactly $5,000. So we divide our $5,000 by our little future value interest factor of a single amount, this 1 plus the interest rate raised to the power of the number of periods. And just to prove that it actually works, if you were to start with $4,132 and add on interest for 2 years, you would find that your deposit would have grown to $5,000 exactly. So it's one simple way of just proving that our little formula actually works. Now, It's a backward view of a future value. So where might you use it? How might it be useful? Well, before we go on to it, we can do the same with an annuity. We can think about the present value of annuities. And I'd like to just to point out that all we've done here is to move money's value round in time. We've got now a little blue TARDIS that moves around in time, except it's just a financial one. And we've moved to a point in time to think about what some money is worth at that point in time. Then we can move forward in time and think about what it would be worth if we compounded some interest. And then we can move back in time a little bit and think what it would be worth if we decompounded, or we call it discounted, back to that other period. Our equations are always the same equation, just rearranged a little bit. And in the middle of the equation is an equal sign. And it simply means that provided some of these criteria are met, interest rates and time periods are kept consistent in the way we deal with them, then these different amounts at different points in time are exactly equal to each other. And so too are the things that we call an annuity, a series of payments that we could calculate the future value of. We can also calculate the present value of. And mathematically, that present value and all of the annuity payments and the future value are all equal to each other. They're identical. And so all we need to do when we're trying to solve some financial problems is to bring a complex problem to a single point in time and think about what that value is at that point in time. And the reason that I'm going to focus on present values is that present value is when? It's now. It's where we are now in time. It's where we're making decisions in time. It's where we're thinking about the future or the past. It's now that we're thinking these things. And so to create an equivalent value in today's terms is quite a useful thing to do. It allows us to evaluate things today when it's most meaningful to us in today's terms. And so our present value is quite a useful tool for that reason. But let's have a look at where we might use it and how we might use it in different circumstances. Now we can use our tables. Technically, I don't need you to do calculations. We have present and future value tables, and our present value tables exist the same way that our future ones do. They're used in the same way. We take the amount of money that we're looking at and we multiply it by a number from the table. Every table works the same way. The numbers on those tables, though, affect our calculation in a slightly different way. So to find the present value of a series of cash flows, we multiply it by a number from the present value of a future series of cash flows or a future number in exactly the same way that we did with our future value tables. The answer comes out different because we're dealing with a different number from each table. So these are our four tables: the present and future values of a single amount and the present and future values of a stream of payments. And all the maths that you need to know is how to look up a table and use those numbers. So what I've done now is to take probably the most complex example to demonstrate how we might use these numbers, particularly the present value ones, so that if you find any other problem, it'll always be simpler than this and therefore easier to deal with. And I'll be giving you some examples to do to practice on. Okay, that's a good question because two people asked me that yesterday and I answered both people but didn't tell anyone else. Okay, so CF stands for cash flow. I put CF there because it's a button that appears on a lot of financial calculators. It has CF to represent cash flow. A lot of other financial calculators use the letters PMT, which actually stand for payment, not what you might expect. Now, both mean the same thing. It's a series of future payments that are annuities. So on all of these financial calculators, the assumption is that a cash flow or a payment using the buttons on these calculators are simply representative of a series of future payments that we would call annuities. They all mean the same thing there. Is that okay? Good. And my apologies for not having been clearer about that earlier. Which, if you ever find anything that you're not clear about, it's my fault, so tell me and I'll explain it to you.
Going back to the previous one, what was T representative of?
Where's T?
In the there, yeah.
Okay. It's the time period. So, yes, N represents a specific time period that we're looking at. So N in the future might be 5, that's 5 years in the future. T represents a series of time periods leading up to that. So here we're simply looking at a time period that exists from time period 1 through to the 5th time period, and we're going to repeat our operation of this that for each of those time periods in between those 2 points in time. I don't expect you to have to ever think about or use this. It's just a shorthand way of describing a whole series of calculations that we have to do. So we repeat this calculation over and over again, starting with t equals 1 and going through to t equals whatever future number of periods we have. Don't worry about that though. That's not a sort of arithmetic I want you to have to be concerned about in this course. But I do need you to think about the fact that the arithmetic that we've got is there for a purpose. It's to help us solve problems in real life and their financial problems. So here's an advertisement that came from Trade Me. It could equally have come from the newspaper, it could have come from anywhere, but it has features about it that I think are quite important because it offers us two things. It offers us a product that we might like, and it offers us a finance contract to accompany the purchase of that product. Now, it could be anything, but we find this more often than not, it's made publicly available like this for vehicles, or white goods, or electronics, but vehicles are the easiest one to see on a regular basis. So here's your commuter scooter if you're coming into the university, at least up until probably May, then it gets too cold and wet and you really don't want to ride these things around. So. But it has a price, and it's asking price from the provider of the asset, the motor scooter, a motorbike shop, is asking for $10,990, which to me seems to be an awful lot for a little motor scooter, but there again, it's pretty cute, isn't it? For a motor scooter. Now, alongside this product is also a finance offer to say, look, the shop who's selling you the motor scooter realises not many people have $11,000 in cash, but they still want the product. So to help encourage you to buy the product, the shop that's selling this motor scooter is saying, well, look, you don't have to come up with all of the cash. We'll arrange for somebody to lend the money to you so that you can buy our product. And you don't need the money up front. All you need to be able to do is satisfy the lender that you can repay this money over time. Now, in addition to that, we've got a really, really good lender who's willing to lend the money to you at a 0% interest rate. Isn't that cool? And this is the offer that I want you to be suspicious of. Because apart from your mum and dad and the government, when you're borrowing money to finance your studies, who else will lend you money free? Not many people. I certainly wouldn't. And I doubt if you'd lend it to me either. So when you see an offer that looks too good to be true, it usually is too good to be true. So how do we dig into it? How do we find out what's actually happening here? Well, this offer had some data that went with it. So the finance provider's name I've taken out to protect the innocent. Innocent. Finance provider. I think they call that an oxymoron, isn't it? So based on a 12-month contract, a 50% deposit, monthly payments, and what appears to be a 0% interest rate. The company's normal terms lending conditions and criteria apply. In addition to that, there was a documentation fee, a setup fee of $423, and this PPSR fee. Now, you can't really get over this, but you need to know about this personal property security register. It means that your little vehicle here, your motor scooter that you bought or are going to buy, is now the security for this loan. You're paying a fee so that this motor scooter can be registered as security for this loan, which simply means that if you fail to make any payments on your loan to this finance company, they have a legal right to come and take your motor scooter away from you or employ somebody to do it. Now, they might do it themselves, but they'll normally employ somebody who's bigger than you to go and get it back off you. And a maintenance fee as well, $8 a month for the term of the contract. So now there's a couple of things I'd like you to think about, and I'm going to demonstrate this via some pictures of an Excel spreadsheet that do some calculations. And they're simply, Excel is real cool because it does all of the calculations for you, and it allows you to do multiple calculations and put them all together. So I'd like just to think about the different calculations that we need to consider with this finance offer. So what I've done here is to do a timeline to incorporate all of the different bits and pieces that this finance company has said are part of your interest-free loan and have a look at what it actually turns out to be. So you'll see on the left-hand side there I've got a series of fees. So that left-hand column, well, the second to left-hand column, the first one is a month, a 12-month period, simply says that the finance company is going to charge you a fee right now, day one, of $423, the setup fee. In addition to that, they're going to charge you $8 a month during the entire course of the loan. So all of these are payments you're going to have to make to the finance company. And they've got a negative sign that's showing that you're paying the money to somebody else. Now, in addition to that, the finance companies are going to lend you half of the value of the motor scooter. You're going to have to come up with the other half. So this loan is simply for 50%. You're going to have to put the deposit, the rest of the money in there of your own money, and the finance company will lend you half of the value of the motor scooter. So the amount of the loan payment, you can see at the top of the middle big column, there's $5,495. It's got a positive sign, or that hasn't got a negative sign, so it's money you're going to get from the finance company to pay for the motor scooter. And following that are a whole lot of payments that you're going to make to the motor scooter company. And that's effectively the $5,495 divided by 12. They've told you there's no interest. So there's no interest on top of that. You're simply going to pay 1/12 of that every month for the next 12 months. And the sum total of all of our payments is represented in the right-hand column. If we add together all the money that we receive, so it's our $5,495 minus the $423 administration fee that we have to pay, the net proceeds that we get from the finance company is only $5,072. And the rest of the money we're going to have to find out of our own money to buy the motor scooter for $10,990. And then we've got all of these repayments that we have to make, which are our $457, that's 1/12 of the amount we borrowed, plus the $8, the monthly fee that's being charged for having the loan there in the first place, adds up to our total repayments. Now, our formula that we have is able to be rearranged again. Instead of trying to find out the present value or the future value, we can rearrange it to find out the interest rate. I'm never going to ask you to do that. It needs a little bit more maths again to be able to solve for the interest rate, but we can do it, and we can ask Excel to do it, and Excel does it really quick and easy. And it says that this series of payments over 12 months, in order for it to work, it would need an interest rate of 1.53%. If we put in an interest rate of 1.53%, everything works out the way it is. That amount of loan that we borrow at the start and all of those repayments, it all gets paid off beautifully if the interest rate was 1.53% per period. Now, each of these periods is only 1 month long. And effectively, that means if we multiply it by 12, the effective rate of interest on this interest-free loan, because of all of the fees and all of the things that are happening on it, is actually 18%. So when you see an interest-free loan, be very, very careful about it. I'm going to give you a chance to practice using Excel. I know a lot of you may not have used it, and so there will be some tutorials on how to do it. In your assignment, you'll get a chance to practice with a real-life situation of a finance offer that's being made to you, so that you have the ability to analyse any other finance offers you see. We're going to make it a reasonably complex one like this. So what have we done? We've taken all payments into consideration, ones that happen today, ones that happen in the future, and we've created a timeline. Timeline that I suggested yesterday was a good way to analyse anything. And then we've simply used our simple formula for future value or present value. We've let Excel rearrange it so it solves for the thing we want to find out, and found out that our interest-free offer actually isn't interest-free at all. Now, on top of that, I want to suggest something else. Imagine that none of these other payments were there. The $423 upfront fee wasn't there. The $8 per month maintenance fee wasn't there. Is it still an interest-free offer then? Now we have to think about disentangling the two things that you're being offered. One of them is a product that's a sale to you, and the other one is a finance contract that accompanies that product. Even if there were no fees on the finance contract, there's no such thing as interest-free, is there? So this is the second point I need you to think about. It's not something that you can simply teach. You need to think about every individual possible situation logically. There is no such thing as interest-free. And yet it appears from the money that's being discussed here, we have an interest-free loan. But we know that the lender wants to receive an amount of interest. So somebody's hiding something somewhere. Where is it hidden? Well, I'd like to suggest in almost every case, the hidden interest is actually hidden in the price of the product that you're buying. The seller of the motor scooter is making a profit. And in order to get the sale done, the seller is willing to give up some of that profit to encourage you to make the purchase. And the way that they've given up the profit here is simply to give some of the profit to the lender and say, we know, lender, that you need to make a profit. You want to make some interest. Instead of charging the borrower, we'll pay their interest for you. We'll simply put it on in our price of the product. And we're willing to give up that little bit of profit in order to pay the interest so you can make it look really attractive, like it's an interest-free offer. It's not interest-free. The motor vehicle company has paid your interest for you. But they've paid it out of the money that you're going to purchase the scooter for. They've simply taken a little bit of the profit that they're making anyway, and in order to encourage you to buy it, they've turned that into a payment they've made to the finance company instead. So if we were to take out all of those finance payments, all of those are gone, and simply look at the amount of money that you've borrowed and the repayments that are being made there, and recognise that the lender must be making a profit. They must be charging some interest to somebody. The interest must be coming from the motor vehicle dealer. If we were then to think about what we could do with it, it becomes the exciting part of finance. Because here all we've calculated, or been able to calculate, with one simple assumption is, how much must the motor vehicle dealer be paying the finance company? All we need to find out is, well, how much does the finance company usually charge in interest? And that's actually quite easy to do because all finance companies have to disclose in their finance contracts what interest rate they're actually charging. And it's usually relatively similar. I've just simply put in here 18%, the same as the one we calculated before, but most finance companies charge 15, 16, 17, 18% for these types of products. Now, if we plug that interest rate in and use our same formula with this series of future payments and an interest rate of 18%, what should have been the present value? And here we start to find out something different that our maths can do for us. It says that the present value of this loan should be $4,984. If we had borrowed $4,984 and repaid $457.92 over 12 months at a normal borrowing rate of 18%, the amount that the lender would have given us right back at the start would only be $4,984. The lender's happy because they're earning a whole lot of interest. The present value of that interest is the difference between that and the $5,495. What it means to us, though, is if that's the present value equivalent, if that's the difference between the two of them, this should be the amount that the dealer is willing to give up by giving it to the finance company. Who else could they give it to? You. So here's your negotiating point. You've been able to mathematically determine what discount you should be able to get on the product that you're looking to purchase. If the dealer is willing to give up this amount to a finance company so that you'll buy their product, surely they should be willing to give it up to you as well. And in fact, it's a lot simpler because all they have to do is discount their product by that amount, and if you have the cash available, you'll buy it. And if you don't have the cash available, you can simply go to another lender, your bank, for instance. And so long as that other lender's loan rate is lower than 18%, you're still going to be better off. The maths, although it looks sort of silly and maybe scary for some people in the start, is a useful tool for thinking about things that we see in real life. You will be able to look at this if you're able to build your little spreadsheet model in more detail. If you go and have a look at Harvey Norman, Harvey Norman is I'm not promoting Harvey Norman here, but Harvey Norman is transparent in the way that they produce their information for sales and interest-free deals, because they're not interest-free, are they? Because Harvey Norman regularly have interest-free finance on products. And then 2 weeks later, they'll have discounted cash prices on products. And if you build a spreadsheet model that allows you to compare the two offers on the same product at different periods of time, you'll find that Harvey Norman's interest rate is around 16%. And that the discount they offer you for cash 1 week has exactly the same present value as the present value of the cash flows of their finance offer that's offered the following week. Except for Apple products, for some reason. Anyway, that's our little bit of a look at the financial maths side of it. Now, there's no substitute for actually practicing this a little bit, so I'm going to give you some practice examples to do to find out present values of things. And I can't give you examples of every possible situation in real life that you might come across where you could use this, but I do think it's a useful tool to think about present values, to practice it in different situations that you might come across until your way of thinking about life is attuned to the financial aspects of a present value evaluation of things. So we'll have some practice on that. Right, if you do borrow money, it's useful for you to track what's happening. Particularly if you're using consumer finance, it involves cards, pieces of plastic that many finance companies give you that are simply just credit cards. keeping a track on your payments is quite important. So a schedule of your debt and a schedule of the payments is quite an important element to it. Keeping a track on your total debt outstanding at any particular point in time takes very little time to do, but is important for you to ensure that you're on track with things. Checking that you are at all times in a safe situation using our ratios is quite a useful thing to do. Now look, this doesn't take much time, particularly if you maintain a spreadsheet listing, Excel, of all of your outstanding debt. There's very little for you to do other than look at it and keep a track on where you are. Making sure you're safe, making sure that everything's working properly. And our debt safety ratio is simply looking at your monthly payments compared to your take-home pay. Because it's real easy to find really cool-looking deals, 50 months interest-free. I haven't got the money, I'll take that. And once you've done that 3 or 4 times, you might find that your total debt and your total monthly payments are starting to increase to possibly more than you earn each month, because it's real easy to get credit. Another problem with credit too is that the amount you have to pay doesn't always relate to the amount you borrowed. Our 12-month loan that was demonstrated here often has terms and conditions that mean it isn't really a 12-month loan in reality, and repaying your loan is an important consideration. So let's have a look at the different types of repayment options for loans very quickly. We have single payment loans, and a single payment loan we'll come to in a minute, or we have instalment loans. And the way these are calculated simply involve our time value of money arithmetic again. So a single payment loan simply says there's a specific period of time. At the end of that period of time, you have to pay off the loan and all interest. Other than that, no other payments to make. This is involving our definition of this maturity date or the maturity of a loan. A single payment loan simply says you borrow the money now, and in 6 months' time you repay all of the principal and all of the interest in one single amount. Nice and easy to calculate. Quite often these types of loans that are offered to you are very short periods of time and involve you having to provide some sort of security. It's possible that at the end of that period of time, the lender may say, well, if you haven't got the money available, we'll let you extend the loan for another short period of time. But the interest rate might be a little bit higher. Don't forget, though, if you don't make a payment, the interest is compounding for those periods of time. If you take a very short-term loan with a single payment at the end of a month and you don't pay it, the interest accumulates with the loan and it simply becomes a compound interest loan with a compound period of 1 month. And you know how dangerous that can be from the calculations we've done previously, so be very careful of single payment loans. Now, the way that interest is charged is different with different types of loans as well, and you may find some lenders provide you with information that has a different calculation that we would normally think of. But all it involves is the difference between paying interest at the start and paying interest at the end. Most lenders charge interest at the end of a loan. Some lenders calculate the interest and deduct it at the start of the loan. So a discounted method of payment is a type of loan that you might come across, but you have to realise that it costs you more than you are thinking it does. Okay. Have a good weekend. Don't come back afterwards.